Hi there, my name is Peter Terrace, and I am the candidate for the PPC for the riding of Niagara Falls. And the one thing I want to talk to you today is the new proposal that has come forward from the Liberals and the NDP that they want to expand on some electoral reform. And I just want to read the things that the three things that they're looking to do. So they want to allow an expanded 3-day voting period during general elections, allowing voters to cast their ballots at any polling place within their riding, and improving the mail-in ballot process with both accessibility and maintaining integrity in mind. So I think instead of calling this electoral reform, I think a more accurate thing would be just to say, hey, we want to cheat at elections, and we want to have a better way of doing it. We want to have it affirmed in our law. So we want to have these specific reforms. I mean, I guess the one good thing that could result from this is we could have a 200% voter turnout. Maybe Justin Trudeau can get 81 million votes in the next general election. Who knows with these kind of electoral reforms? So I think they're a terrible idea. But the good thing is, it brought up the idea that maybe we do need some electoral reform or some parliamentary reform. So I think let's explore that. Let's consider, in light of the recent federal court decision that found that the Justin Trudeau Liberals with the NDP, they were working in concert, acted illegally, invoking the Emergencies Act. Do we really want to have electoral reform that makes it easier to cheat? I think we actually need electoral reform. So maybe they're bringing up these ideas come at a good time, because it's probably a good idea to have a discussion about electoral reform. We have bad politicians. We've always had bad politicians. But I think what we have is we also have a systemic problem with our system. If we did not have a system that was flawed, then bad politicians could not get away with enacting an illegal law against its citizens and using violence against innocent protesters. So we have a systemic problem, and I think the systemic problem can be mitigated or solved by some of the things I want to talk about today. An elected Senate, an elected Prime Minister that is elected by every single person in Canada. Right now, not a single person in Canada can vote for their Prime Minister directly. Also, I think we need to abolish the Governor General and also abolish the monarch as our head of state. And these are the things I want to talk about with you today. So our current parliamentary system, which is shown up here on the screen. So right here it shows the British monarch as being our head of state, and then the Governor General reporting to the head of state, which is the British monarch, which right now happens to be King Charles III. I think that is utter folly to have a monarch of a foreign country to be the head of state of another independent country like Canada. I think this needs to be abolished completely. And if we did that, if we, for example, abolished the British monarchy or abolished the king as our head of state, then there would be no reason to have a Governor General, because the only purpose of the Governor General is to report to the British monarch. This is completely not representative of what happens in our country. So if we remove these two positions, we then have the executive, legislative, and judicial branch of our government. The Prime Minister is an executive branch, or is part of the executive branch. I would contend that the Prime Minister should be the head of state if he could be voted on by all the people. Our current situation right now is that not a single person can vote for the Prime Minister directly. And I think this is a major failing of our democratic system. The people need to have the ability to vote for the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister should be a separate office from the three levels of government, and the Prime Minister should be the head of state that is voted on by all the people. The cabinet would be the executive branch of the government. So the proposal that I'm suggesting wouldn't require any restructuring, but would actually simplify our federal political system, but wouldn't require any structural changes to the House, to the way the government runs, except that the Prime Minister would take the spot of the Governor General, and we would remove the British monarch, and that the Prime Minister would then be elected. The cabinet would be chosen by the House leader, which right now would be the person who would be called our prime minister. So, in a general election, under my proposal, if the leader of the party that gets the most seats wins, they don't become the prime minister, they become the House leader. So then they get to choose the cabinet. And I think this would be a much stronger situation, because then the prime minister, as it stands right now, appoints the cabinet, appoints the governor general, appoints Supreme Court judges, appoints the senators. So this prime minister has basically control over the Senate, over the Supreme Court, over the governor general, and the person is not elected. The prime minister is not elected by anyone in our country. The prime minister is basically chosen by his party. He happens to be the leader of the party that wins the most seats in the general election, and that doesn't make any sense. The people need to be able to choose this person. Now, the parties are also too strong in our country, so this would invariably weaken the parties, the strength of the parties, but would empower the individuals and would empower the people. Um, and I think we need to continue to do that. I'm going to go back to all of the establishment political parties only release their platforms. I don't know if you've noticed this, only release their platforms, just before a general election. So every time the establishment parties release their platform, it's only for the current election cycle. But with the PPC, they have a platform that is standing and that is not meant just for one election cycle. It's meant for the next generation. I think we have to look at politics differently. And I think the structure of the country and our political structure matters, because the strength of the parties right now is too high, and it weakens the people. And the voice of the people is very much weakened because the parties are so strong. And so by having an elected prime minister, having elected parliamentarians, this is a very good thing. But I think we also need to have an elected Senate. Our current Senate has 105 senators that are all appointed. And I think a lot of people would say, and rightly so, that it's a dysfunctional organization, it's a dysfunctional part of government, and that it needs to be abolished. And I would agree with them, except that it should be serving a very useful purpose for the people. If we had senators that were elected, if each senator was elected in an area of 4 ridings, so each senator would cover an area of 4 ridings, and they would be elected in that area, then there would be accountability to the senators. So we could even conceive of a situation where we would have a Senate that has been elected by the people, that maybe could be conservative, the House could be liberal, and we could have a PPC prime minister. So and the prime minister would have veto power over any bill. And so, for example, in the situation when the Emergencies Act was invoked by the Liberal government illegally on February 14th, 2022, an elected prime minister would have been able to veto that and say, no, this is illegal, and would have disallowed that. But because we have a system that is flawed, that allowed this kind of abuse of civil liberties to happen, it could happen again unless we change the system. And so the system that I'm proposing, having elected senators, elected prime minister, and a elected parliamentarians, which is already happening, it would require no structural change from Elections Canada. The same type of structure that we have in running a general election would be extended to senators and to the prime minister, and it would just basically be a longer ballot. That's all, but everything else would be the same. Um, okay, I just want to come back to this schematic of our current system of government that is enacted in Canada right now. So, I mean, the objective here is to keep what is good and to improve on what needs improving. I mean, we need to improve our democracy, but also we don't want to dismantle all our the current the things that are working. I mean, we want to just basically tweak things that need to be tweaked in order to give more power to the people and to make basically government more accountable to the people. So currently in our system, if there is a vote of non-confidence, then there's an election, and I believe that's a failure of our of our democratic system. So if the let's say a budget is tabled in the House of Commons and it's voted on in the House of Commons and it falls, then we are off to an election again. I think this is a major flaw. I think if a budget is tabled in the House of Commons and it fails, it should go to the Senate the way it does now, and amendments should be made. The Senate votes on it, goes back to the House of Commons. If the House of Commons approves it and votes on it, then it becomes the budget, and then it's basically signed off by the Prime Minister, who would be up here in the place of the Governor General, and this British monarch would be removed, and the Prime Minister would be our head of state that would be voted on by all the people. I think this would be a far better system, and it would be a great improvement to our current system without requiring any real change. So the Prime Minister would still appoint the Supreme Court judges. The House Leader, who wins basically the leader of the party that wins the most seats in general elections, would still appoint the cabinet, but then it wouldn't be one person appointing senators, Supreme Court judges, Governor General. The senators would now be elected, the parliamentarians would be elected, the cabinet would be appointed by the House Leader, the Supreme Court judges would still be appointed by the Prime Minister. Prime Minister would have veto power, and I think the veto power is important by the Prime Minister, because if, for example, in a situation like the invocation of the Emergencies Act, this could have been prevented if the Prime Minister had that veto power. It would have, at least there would have been a better chance of it being prevented. So the proposal for electoral reform involves abolishing the monarch as the head of state, abolishing the position of the Governor General, making the Prime Minister the head of state, and making the Prime Minister an elected position, that is a position that is elected by all the citizens of Canada, making senators elected and having about the same number of senators. But also, I don't think the reason that I'm suggesting to abolish the Governor General and the King is because I want to erase our history. I think our history is very important. I think we need to hold on to our history, but I think we need to move to a system that is representative and that represents the people of Canada. And that is not happening. And I don't think that happens when we have a foreign monarch as the head of state of our country. So that's really all. And thank you for listening. My name again is Peter Terrace, and I will be the candidate in the next federal election for the PPC in the riding of Niagara Falls or Niagara South. Still unclear about that, but we'll see you soon.